How's it going, folks? So today I'm going to replace that 3D printer with this 3D printer. This is an Ender3 V2. I'm going to unbox it, build it up and add some upgrades. Stay tuned. Welcome back. So those of you who have been on the channel before will know that I do quite a bit of 3D printing to go with my RC trucks and my FPV drones. For the last about 4 years, I've been using a fairly heavily modified Anet A8. Anet A6. That's been upgraded. It's got a metal frame. It's got a different power supply, different main board. It's had different extruders on it, but it's back to its stock one at the moment. And it's been okay to say. Well, I think it's fair to say it's produced some really good prints, and it's also produced some really diabolical prints, and it's just not reliable. So recently I've been taking part in one of the COVID studies where they come and test us at the house every few weeks or every month, and get a load of vouchers for it. So I've cashed in some of those vouchers with Amazon and bought myself a new 3D printer. So this is still a fairly budget 3D printer. It's an Ender3 V2. Costs about £240, something like that. So it's still at the budget end of 3D printing, absolutely. But also I think it's at the consumer end. So my hope, from what I've read and from the huge following for these Creality printers, I'm hoping this will be reliable, reasonably good quality prints. They don't need to be commercial quality. I don't sell my prints very often. I occasionally print bits for other people and charge them a few quid, but only for, really, that covers the materials, to be honest, and a bit of my time. So this is not a commercial venture. This is purely for my own benefit. So as long as it's reliable and it produces consistent quality prints, I'm going to be a happy man. Now, what I've decided to do with this is not a sort of unboxing and build video, because there's a few of those around already. I'll link in the description to one I found that I think is particularly good. It's actually linked from the SaneSmart website, which is a filament provider or filament maker that I use quite a lot. And it's a really good video. It explains it really clearly. You don't need any more than that. Go and have a look in that one if you just want to do a build video. But what I'm going to do with this one is take the opportunity at the build stage to put a couple of upgraded parts on it. So when I ordered it, I ordered to go with it a BL Touch, which is if you can see that white, it's quite bright here today unfortunately, but that is a BL Touch. That is a auto bed leveling kit, and we'll explain that in a little while. And then in this generic Chinese padded envelope is a load of upgraded bits for the Creality. So there's some what they call Capricorn tubing, there's a metal extruder, and this kind of replaces the final few weaknesses, I think, with the Ender3 V2 as opposed to the Ender3 or the Ender3 Pro. Given that this only costs £40, and I think this was probably about 20, can't remember, the whole lot came to just under £300. I don't quite know why they don't include this from the factory. It can't cost that much more in terms of part costs. Who knows? But there we go. And also I have printed with my old printer, which kind of felt like making it dig its own grave before I killed it, another bracket, because I want to actually put the screen and the control interface on the opposite side so that it works nicely on my bench. But other than that, it's going to be a pretty standard build. So we'll jump in, get the thing unboxed and opened and make sure everything's okay. And then what I'll do is figure out how I'm going to install these upgrades along the build process and make sure that you can see that as it happens. Right, so we've got a table full of bits. Let's get building. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start building anything up really is install the wiring for the bed levelling sensor and the new Capricorn tubing, the new Bowden tubing, onto this piece here. This sort of umbilical cord for the hot end. It's quite neatly wrapped in there. You can definitely get some more cable in there, and then we can do that all nice and neatly, so we haven't got extra cables poking about and it still looks nice and factory. So we'll get on with that now. Okay, so we've fed that through. Anybody who's had any experience with this plastic braiding knows it can be a bit of a pain, but it wasn't too bad actually. There's plenty of room in there, and that's all gone in really nicely. So that's going to look really nice and neat when it's done, and that's really important to me because I want this to look quite factory, although I'm going to be changing it a little bit because it wouldn't be the same without. So the next job is to actually install the sensor itself. So this is a BL Touch sensor. And what that basically does, I'll show you later, is kind of probes the bed in various different places before you start a print, and then tells the printer if there's any fluctuations in the print bed so that it can adjust for those. Very clever, really smart. So in the kit is everything you need to install it into the printer, including the correct bracket to fit the Ender3 V2, which is fabulous. So I'm going to install that now, and then plug it in, and then we're going to crack open this hot end and install the first bit of the upgraded tubing, etc. It's all M3 hardware that this comes with, so if like me you're into RC, you'll almost certainly have the requisite hex driver already and not have to use the piddly little Allen keys that you get. So the other nice thing about this BL Touch kit is, and the Ender3 V2, is the board, the main board, in my case the version 4.2.2, already has the plug socket ready to go, so we just plug that in. And we are all done effectively for our BL Touch, apart from firmware, but we'll come to that later. So that's how simple it is to fit a BL Touch. It's much nicer to be doing it as I'm building the printer because I can make it look tidier, but obviously it'd be super simple to do after the fact. The Ender3 V2 has holes in the hot end carriage already to accept the little bracket, so it's all just plug and play. Really is fantastic stuff. So hopefully that's that. Right, so our next job is going to be replacing this PTFE tube, which is rather cheap and rubbish, with some really nice Capricorn tubing. I think it's just a brand name. So this little pack that I've bought, despite being kind of generic China packaging, is kind of genuine Creality stuff. So it's a genuine upgrade kit, which includes bed springs, which are the upgraded yellow ones, so I'll put those on. The Capricorn tube and the fitments for those, and then this is a replacement extruder, which is, I think it's cast aluminium, or it's certainly metal. The plastic one on the original kit is prone to breaking apparently, so that will be going on there as well, but we'll come to that in a minute. So right now we're going to just swap out the Bowden PTFE Bowden tube for this nice Capricorn tube, when you get a sticker and all sorts of stuff in there, so that's lovely. So we'll set those bed springs to one side for a moment, and then to do this easily we're going to have to take the fan shroud off, which is I think screwed on, or is it just clipped on? I'm going to undo these two screws at the top here, and hopefully that will just come off. So that basically looks to be exactly the same coupler that's in there already. Not going to bother changing that then. So what we do is we pull off this little blue tab, like that. This coupler here is kind of a bit like push fit plumbing, so it kind of pushes in and grabs. So push that down, and that should release that tubing. There we go. Lovely. Good, good. Now what we want to do, because that's nice and square, it is important that this is really nice and square, is push that all the way in. Now that came out a good inch and a half, 35-40 mil. So we want to make sure it's gone back in that far as well. Which it has, no problem at all. Give that a little pull, and then pop our little clip back in, and that spacer clip holds that in nice and firm. That's not coming out of there. So that's super simple. I'm not going to cut this yet. I'm going to wait until I've assembled and then I'm going to cut it. But what I can now do is put all of this back together as neat and tidily as we can. And that, as they say, is that. Now, I've resisted the temptation there to try and hide that last bit of wire to the BL Touch. I did think about it, but I think that's going to be, without chopping this fan shroud to pieces, that's going to be quite difficult to do. So for the time being, I'm just going to leave that as is, and we'll get some zip ties on there. Again, the BL Touch comes with a bunch of zip ties, which is handy. Okay, that's all good. Right, something else I'm going to do while I'm under here is just unfeed this ribbon cables. This is the ribbon cable that goes to the control panel. Plugs in fairly straightforward. But I'm actually going to move my control panel to the other side, so I'm going to reroute this wiring, this cabling now, just to make that a little bit easier further down the line. Okay, so pretty conveniently there's a lovely gap at the side there, just pokes through perfectly, so we're going to tidy that up afterwards. Okay, so the work underneath is done for now. We will have to tighten some stuff up as we build. You'll see that from the build videos. You do need to double check every screw, every nut and bolt. So we'll do that shortly. But for now, that should do us underneath. That's a great example of that is this. Not supposed to do that. Okay, so at that point, that's the upgrading done. As I mentioned before, I've already printed a new bracket for this to go into. So that comes out of there like that. This needs finishing, but that will go into there like that when I've sanded it down. And that just means I can have this on the opposite side, which for the way my desk is set up works nicer for me. Obviously you don't need to do that, that's just my personal choice to do that. So I'm going to stop filming at this point, get on with some build stuff. If there is anything specific that I think is worth mentioning as part of the build that I don't think I've seen mentioned anywhere else, I will of course mention that. But other than that, hopefully the next time you see us we'll have a completed printer. Stay tuned for that.